Welcome to the first live Shindig event that we've done with EmergingEdTech. Today we're talking about augmented reality applications and how they're being used in our classrooms and in the educational and instructional setting. My name is Kelly Walsh. I'm the Chief Information Officer at the College of Westchester in White Plains, New York, where it is also my privilege and pleasure to teach. I also run the website EmergingEdTech.com, where we've been exploring the evolving digital technologies and how they can be used ultimately to enhance student learning outcomes, because that's really what it's all about. We've been doing that since 2009 out on the site. It's been a lot of fun. I love interacting with everyone, so thank you to everyone who follows our work. And if you haven't checked it out, come on out to EmergingEdTech.com and give us a look. I am also the community administrator for the Flip Learning Network, which is online at fliplearning.org, and I write the Tech Perspectives column for University Business. So that's enough, probably too much about me. Let's talk about our panelists who are joining us today. So we've got some folks who have varying levels of involvement in the world of augmented reality, and I'm really delighted to have them here with us. We have and I do want to mention that I'll take a few moments after we do some introductions to talk a little bit about augmented reality in general. So if anybody's not very familiar, just kind of a brief overview. But first, again, our panelists. So we're joined by Louis Chavez, who is the community manager and creative producer for GoMeta. Hi, Louis. GoMeta makes an app called Metaverse and may very well be involved in other types of things, but that was my introduction to them. And Metaverse is really neat. So this is AR at the next level, because Metaverse allows you, it's free, first of all, and allows you to create your own interactive augmented reality experience. So really, really cool stuff. So thanks again, Louis. Really happy to have you. We have Hisham Hosni joining us from Eqypt. Hisham is the co-founder and marketing manager at LIVIT Studios. LIVIT Studios was founded in 2015 and creates augmented reality and virtual reality apps specifically for education. We had a post a couple weeks ago, or a couple months ago, about one of LIVIT's, what they're doing with this really cool kind of amalgamation of old school and new school. So they've got an app that brings augmented reality to an educational textbook. So, you know, you got your traditional physical book and then the augmented reality layer where you can, you know, point the camera at these images and have this interactive experience in the, you know, the way augmented reality works. So really neat stuff. Really glad to have Hisham with us. And we have Ben Feynman, who joins us from Internet2. So Ben is the program manager for NetPlus, Video, Voice, and Communication Services for Internet2. Internet2 is the Education and Research Internet Network Consortium. And Ben is an industry veteran that presents often at many conferences about a wide variety of subjects. And I ran into him at the University Business Conference earlier this year, and he did a great session on virtual reality in the classroom. So thank you for joining us, Ben. And I am going to, let's go around and allow each of you to talk a little bit about yourselves and your experience with augmented reality. So I'm just going to go around the panel here. How about we start with Hisham?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Okay, let me just start introducing myself. My name is Hisham Hosni. I'm a co-founder at LIVIT Studios. We have first started our company 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago. And when we started our first educational experiences in virtual and augmented reality, we were really happy to see the responses of children and educators having fun and enjoying education differently. And that's something that we really appreciate, because it shows how people perceive information and knowledge differently using those technologies. Let me just talk about our first product that we have introduced this year. It's called ImagineBooks. I'm just gonna send you the website for it, just to, if you later would like to see the product. But I have a hard copy here. That's ImagineBooks. It's our first product that we have introduced this year. And as Kelly has introduced the product, it's actually talking about the human body and how this could be an interactive book for children to learn differently by visualizing things instead of seeing the 2D pictures. No, this way, in this way, they can see the 3D interactive 3D models, and this could help them perceive information a lot better. And that's something that we really appreciate, because when we introduced this to the children at the first time, they were really amazed, and they were really happy to see. I haven't seen that before. Even parents, when the first look, when they have seen the product, they have been amazed how lucky the next generation is going to learn, and how they wish that they are learned this way. And we have actually started this product, launched it almost 2 months ago, and we are currently in its production, and we should be delivering our product in March 2018, and it's going to be available for everyone to buy it if they are interested. But the most out of this product is actually how this technology could affect even classrooms, how the children perceive information, because we have integrated games inside our application, which was the most interesting part for the children whenever they have tried it the first place. Uh, the first thing that the reaction that we have seen from the children is that it's going to be very challenging for them to answer the questions correctly. We have embedded in our application a game to somehow assess their understanding about the human body. The book consists of almost 15 pages, so it's very informative and to the point. And that's something that we really would like to add, that information is mostly delivered visually by using augmented reality used in our application. So that's briefly about the product. If you are interested to see more about, you can check the link I have just sent you in the conversation.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much. And I will, before we go on, I will mention that as soon as we're done with the introductions, I will go over some of the excellent functionality here in Shindig. So there's a lot of ways to interact, and we'll get to that in just a few minutes. But let me have Ben and Lewis introduce themselves. So Ben, tell us a little about your experiences with augmented reality.
Yeah, appreciate it, Kelly. And so thanks for the introduction, by the way, too. And just a little bit more about Internet 2. We are a nonprofit organization. We're the consortium of about 330 colleges and universities that, so we run the internet backbone for research and education, but we also facilitate working groups and activities between our universities for things that use the network. And our position with virtual and augmented reality is it's going to be, a new collaboration paradigm. So historically, we've collaborated using things like video conferencing and voice over IP, the common stuff like that. But as we look to the future, we will be using these newer technologies to collaborate more efficiently and effectively in deeper ways. And so that's the kind of thing that we're exploring. The main way that we're doing that, specifically with VR and AR, is we have a working group, and it's an open working group for anyone to join as long as you're in the higher education community. And I'm going to paste the link into the chat if I can multitask and do that. So encourage anyone to check that out. But the goal of the working group is twofold. The first goal is just to get everybody together and talking about the technologies and how we're using them, not unlike what we're doing today. And so since it's an emerging space, I think this kind of conversation is invaluable because we're all kind of figuring it out together. But the second goal is a little more specific in terms of promoting standards and interoperability between distributed virtual environments. And so we know that with any new technology, it starts out in a proprietary and siloed kind of way. But we in higher education like to collaborate with each other and don't like silos. So working together to ensure that as the technologies evolve, they aren't limited by proprietary siloed technologies. So that's pretty much it. And again, appreciate Kelly, the invitation to be here today, and excited to have the conversation.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for joining us. And Louis, so tell us a little bit about your involvement in augmented reality.
Sure, yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Luis. I'm the head of community here at Metaverse. Metaverse is a platform that makes it easy for anybody to create augmented reality experiences. It is 100% free to use, and the idea behind it when we first started about a year ago was we wanted to make it easy for people to create whatever they wanted to create within technology without needing to code anything. And from that has sort of evolved, it sort of evolved into AR and prototyping for different sorts of apps. We sort of began throwing a bunch of darts at a board in many different areas, and we've recently seen some very positive traction in education. In particular, teachers and students as young as 7, 8 years old have been creating their own AR experiences to use and to teach in the classroom. So that's sort of what we're focusing on right now.
Outstanding. Oh, now I'm hearing an echo. Hopefully that won't last. We have a very well-rounded group, as you can see here, and thank you again very much, gentlemen. Before getting into some specific questions, let's talk a little bit about the Shindig platform. First, a great big thank you to the folks at Shindig for allowing us to use their platform to do this. Really an enjoyable platform that I've had the pleasure of participating in as a participant numerous times over the last year, and this is my first experience hosting it. And we've got some folks like Hisham and Patrick helping us out. Thank you very much for your help. So some of the things you can do in Shindig that are rather unique to Shindig. First of all, feel free to turn on your webcams if you wish to, if you haven't, so that we can see you and you can see each other. One thing you can do is you can very easily connect with anybody else who's kind of floating around down there in the participant swarm, is I've heard someone call it. And if you just click on someone else, they will get a request to connect with you if they wish to, and they can. And you can have your own little breakout sessions very easily while still hearing the session up here on stage. We do tend to call this area up where the four of us are the stage. And later on, there will be an opportunity for you to join us. So we can have up to 4 folks, 4 windows up there that we can display. And you see, hopefully at the bottom of your screen, a set of icons, a strip of icons. And there you can access the chat. So you can chat with the whole group or with anybody individually. The question there is to ask a question that we will be able to see later and hope to respond to. And the hand is to raise your hand and say that you want to come up on stage. Now, later on, after we get through some of our dialogue, we hope to have a good 15, 20 minutes or more to work with you guys, to allow you to come up on stage. We're actually going to kind of open up a podium where you can come up. So please feel free to take advantage of that functionality. And let us go ahead and move forward. So, if you're relatively new to AR, just, real quick, kind of a broad introduction. So the idea of augmented reality, the most common forms of augmented reality are happening using this, the phone device. So applications are developed where the phone on the camera is pointed at a target object. And that's typically a key to how it works, that it's the software is triggered by seeing something. My first exposure to this was using Google Translate. The Google Translate app is really pretty amazing. I had the pleasure a couple years ago of going to Europe, and with Google Translate, you can point the phone at a sign in one of, I don't know how many languages they have, but they recognize many, many languages. And it translates that to your native language. So I was translating Italian and Spanish to English using the phone. And somehow it's just even extra cool that it does it in the font on the sign. So, all of a sudden you get, the English version that looks just like the sign. Really, really quite amazing. in the educational realm, there are so many apps coming along. In the last couple of years, it's just grown exponentially. And many of them are science-oriented, but there can be so many other uses. I've had some exposure to some of the kind of more science-oriented ones. So, for example, think of a chemistry class. You're studying a chemistry module. Well, you may have a chemistry app. By the way, many of them are free, but many of them also charge a fee, often relatively inexpensive. And so you will maybe have to in some cases, print a target image that you can then point the phone at. And now your two-dimensional chemistry molecule you're looking at all of a sudden has a three-dimensional view that you may be able to turn and pivot, and will have often interactive links or text that you can work with. I've seen this for outer space. One of the early apps I had seen that was great was 4D Anatomy from DAQRI. They have two images, so they have a heart app and a human body app, and you print out that heart app and then you point the phone at it. And now on the phone you get this menu and this interactive view of the heart where you can say, I just want to see, and I'm not I don't know all these terms well, but I just want to see the ventricles or the aorta, and then in the human body I want to see the skeletal system or just the muscular system. So just tremendous potential for really fun interactive types of things that can happen and can really bring just a new level of engagement and a very new perspective, quite literally, on teaching and learning. So that's kind of a rough look at what's going on in AR, to be contrasted with virtual reality, right? Virtual reality, it tends to be more immersive. You need a large headset very often, typically much more expensive to get into because you need a higher level computing capabilities, not just the phone. So a lot of fun stuff going on there too, no doubt. And then there is this emerging kind of way that these things are coming together, and the term mixed reality comes into play, where you're kind of doing a little of both of these things. But we're focusing a little more on AR, which I find particularly fascinating because it's an easier and much less costly adoption curve. So I do have a couple specific questions for each of you gentlemen, but one in particular I wanted to start with is, where are we seeing AR adopted the most in education? I just mentioned that I've certainly seen science types of applications, but it can undeniably go beyond that. And I'd be curious to hear from others about their experiences. And then also at what grade levels, right? I guess it's logical to think that high school and higher ed lend themselves to this because of the wide availability of phones amongst our students. But there's a lot of other ways to approach this, right? We could do it with an iPad at younger ages. So just kind of opening up the floor to the three of you to hear your experiences with where you're seeing AR adopted in the classrooms. Just feel free to jump in.
So I guess I was quickest to the mute button, so I'll go first. I think I'm seeing the most adoption actually in the K-12 space. And I think a lot of that has to do, so there's a couple interesting trends at play. Kelly, you made a great observation that phones are much more ubiquitous in higher education. So in colleges and universities, for the most part, you can assume that every one of your students is going to have a smartphone, and that enhances your ability to do these kinds of activities quite a bit. But the other trend is content, and I think both of our other speakers are actually well positioned to address this topic in terms of what we're lacking right now is sophisticated content. And so a lot of the content that's available is most suitable for the K-12 space in terms of things like learning about animals, for example. There's a program that lets you put animals around your classroom, and so you can see what it looks like to have an elephant standing on the desk, and you can examine the elephant from different angles and things like that. Which middle schoolers they eat that right up. In university level courses, maybe that's not sophisticated enough to enhance the curriculum, but it's that kind of thing that simpler applications can be more engaging in the K-12 space. In the university space, certainly there are emerging applications as well. I think anatomy's been mentioned a couple of times. That seems to be low-hanging fruit for whatever reason. But Case Western has a collaboration they've done with Microsoft and HoloLens, where they've developed a fairly sophisticated anatomy curriculum using augmented reality, which saves them both money that they might spend on cadavers, but also makes the curriculum much more accessible to anybody that can get the augmented reality hardware versus having to actually have access to a cadaver. The last example I'll point out, and then I'll cede the floor to my co-presenters, is astronomy. And one of the other things that seems to be low-hanging fruit is these augmented reality applications that give you more information about the night sky. And so identifying what you're looking at, but also showing you constellations and man-made objects, so tracking satellites in orbit and things like that. And that's easily integrated into astronomy curriculums. But there's lots more.
Great, excellent, thank you. Hisham, Lewis, anything to add to that?
Yes, regarding, I would like to comment regarding the K-12, because it's most adopted over there, because the new technology has actually enhanced the children with iPads, phones, and most of the kids right now, they already have the iPad, and that was one of our great observations before we create Imagine a Books, was to the hardware is very at the beginning is going to be very expensive, but that's because it's the new technology. But now, when it's going to be available to everyone has now smartphones and even tablets as an extra one. They can actually use it to learn, and instead of just using books, no, they can integrate both the iPad and the usage of the iPad in education differently, and that's something that's very affordable for everyone to have in this adopting the new technology. Also regarding the content, maybe I'm just going to comment on the content. The content for the K-12 is going to be a lot easier than the university content, because it's a lot simplified and it's very straightforward. But maybe that's something that we have gone through before, creating a virtual reality application that's very sophisticated in physics. It consumes a lot of time to integrate the equations and integrate everything just to simulate the content correctly. Regarding the theoretical part, we would like to visualize things. So this consumes a lot of effort to create a content for universities. But on the other hand, the content for the K-12 is a lot simpler, and even the book that we have created is targeting age from 8 to 12, because this is the middle age where students are able to interact with the tablets and really enjoy the experiences using the AR and the tablets as well at this age.
Great, great. So actually, it's kind of a perfect segue to you, Lewis. One of the things I wanted to ask you was, with Metaverse, where do you see the adoption? Has it been weighted more towards K-12, as we're hearing from Ben and Hisham, that there seems to be a little more happening in augmented reality in the K-12 environment, or more with higher ed, or scattered, or what's your observation?
So we've seen several different use cases in higher education, certainly, but where we found our sweet spot to be is starting around 4th grade all the way through about 11th grade. Once the concepts get a little bit more complex, it becomes tough to present those, at least as far as we've seen, but it's sort of on two different levels. On one side, we have teachers creating experiences for their classroom, and we have actually, in terms of content, crowdsourced a lot of this material. If you open up the mobile app, just on the homepage, we've got what we call breakouts, and they're all different subject matters. They're basically digital escape rooms that ask for certain clues, contextual clues with history, science, math, etc. And so that's sort of the instructional level. And then the other the other side of this thing is the students creating content for themselves. We've seen students and teachers using this to allow students to demonstrate understanding in their classroom. And so these students are creating AR experiences based off of books. They're creating their own custom games on the platform. And yeah, I mean, the youngest we've seen create is probably 7 years old, very bright young kids that are interested in technology.
And I really like what you're doing there because, as I mentioned in my comments, I think one of the big gaps right now is content availability. And so creating an easy way, especially for kids to get involved in content creation, I think that's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to piggyback off that. What's sort of our philosophy is we wanted to reduce the friction of creation, so much so that like anybody can create on this thing. Think about it as like YouTube, but just for augmented reality. Like when YouTube first came out, people were saying, "Oh, this will never be adopted. We have theaters, we have television. Why do we want this?" And then soon you see all of these videos of like somebody, like an unboxing video, and for some reason that is getting plays because it just became easy for anybody to upload to YouTube. And so that's our goal, is we want to just make it easy for anyone to upload.
That's excellent. That's very exciting and a great way to look at it. I love the idea of student-created content. I'm a big fan of students creating their learning experiences and demonstrating it through digital artifacts. So Hisham, let me ask, you guys have your first book out. What's next? A different subject matter, a different grade level? How do you plan on building on that?
Yeah, well, actually, Imagine Books is a series of augmented reality books. So our first book was the human body or the human anatomy for the K12, but we are planning on after we finish the first book is to publish another books regarding science, and that's going to be the second book is going to be about the outer space. The most interesting part for this is the interactive way for our application, how games are perceived by the children or the students.
Did we just lose you there?
Looks
Well,
like
I think we lost Hisham. He should be back with us in a moment. So, building on that, and before we kind of get into questions from the audience, Ben, kind of a question for you. Oh, sorry, Hisham, you hear us again?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, we lost you. Did you want to complete your thought?
Yes. Okay. Sorry for that disconnection. Yes, regarding the interactive part is something that we really would like to have a feedback on, because how students are going to learn interactively is very difficult. And as we said at the beginning of our meeting, we are trying to figure out what's the best way for children to use this technology, and that's something that we have gone through for the last 2 years, and we are still improving. And even the content creation for the children themselves is very interesting for the children, because whenever the child see the augmented reality, they would like to know what is augmented reality at the first before they actually see the content, which is very which allows them to would like to discover things up, and how AR can go for. So uh, Imagine Books is our first, the human body is our first book, but we are planning on publishing a series of other books after we finish the first one. So hopefully, whenever we deliver that on March 2018, maybe by the end of 2018, we will be able to figure out what's the best way for kids to learn using the augmented reality technology.
Okay, great. You said something in there that made me think. We're talking about the best way for kids to learn from these tools. A question I was curious to ask Ben from his perspective was, looking at virtual reality, looking at augmented, and looking at mixed. Any thoughts or observations about what you're seeing about where's that going to go? I mean, it'd be really interesting to of course, who knows, but I was just curious to see what you've seen out there about how these things are going to kind of blend together perhaps over time.
Great question, and I appreciate that. Is the point that I think is important is that augmented reality and virtual reality are just two ends of the same spectrum. And where they meet in the middle is more or less mixed reality. But so what I mean by this is on the augmented reality end of the spectrum, for the most part, we're looking at the virtual elements through our devices, through our phones, and they are limited to maybe layering additional information about our physical environment, things like that. On the other end of the spectrum, the virtual reality, we're wearing these goggles that cover our entire field of vision, and we're completely immersed in the environment, which can then take us to a completely different place, a different planet, a different time, all that good stuff. So both have their applications today, but they're limited in what they can do. So augmented reality can't take you to a different place and immerse you. Virtual reality can't leave you free to continue interacting with your actual physical environment and the people that are in it. And so the sweet spot is in the middle, where you can replace as much or as little of your physical environment as you want. And that's really the promise of mixed reality. And so that's where I see this going. More pragmatically, the next step is going to be much like Google Cardboard takes your phone and turns it into a virtual reality device. The next step will be using the phones and turning them into mixed reality devices. So using the phones as in the augmented reality functions, but in a way that covers your field of vision and enables you to have mixed reality experiences without having a $3,000 HoloLens and things like that. So practically, I think that's going to be the next step, but I wouldn't want to wager on how long it's going to take for that to happen.
Sure. All right. Interesting. We do have a few questions coming in, so I'm just going to throw a few of those out. One, someone asked, is augmented reality having more of a challenge finding acceptance in higher education because of the fact that it's a BYOD environment? And I'm going to kind of field that one. Although I welcome any input from any of you. I don't think that is the case because, again, it's really about the smartphone, which is, works fine in and of itself. It's a great BYOD device, right? So BYOD being bring your own device. Higher ed and education in general is at an interesting point as we think about, we keep going mobile, and the norm for computers in the educational realm has been fixed, computer labs and that sort of thing. And then we've seen more of these, the introduction of mobile over the last 10 years and iPad carts or iPad one-to-one, Chromebook one-to-one. But at the same time, for those who are lagging, there's this sort of question of, well, gee, so many people have these, particularly if you're in higher ed or high schools. Maybe we leapfrog right over that stuff and go right to the phone. And in line with that, I think the phone readily lends itself to higher ed. I think these gentlemen have clarified that one of the reasons it's not picking up so quickly there is that the content gets much more complex very quickly and becomes more expensive to develop, whereas it's much easier to create content that lends itself to simpler subjects. Probably an oversimplification, but I think that kind of goes to that question a bit. Another great question we have here that is really interesting, and I'd like to hear from any of you guys if you could weigh in on that, is how are these platforms dealing with accessibility? right? So, you know, what's the AR experience or the equivalent if you've got some accessibility challenges? So, can any of you comment on that?
Sure. So what we've tried to do here at Metaverse is make it as accessible as possible. We started developing on iOS and quickly found that several different classrooms, like you mentioned, were using Chromebooks or were using different sorts of Android tablets. So we're now fully accessible on Chromebook. Kids can now build and experience both on the Chromebook, on almost every Android tablet and iOS devices, and we're looking to incorporate Amazon Kindle devices in the near future.
Now, I think when we're talking about accessibility, we're talking about the challenges of those with some level of disability. At least I assume. How's that play into this?
Okay, I understand now. Okay.
I mean, that's my assumption.
So yeah, I mean, right now, what we've experienced is most of these experiences include a character and a piece of dialogue that needs to be read. And one of the pieces of feedback that we've gotten is, are we doing anything for sort of text to voice? And I mean, we're trying to incorporate as much as we can, and we're a very, very small team and very early in the stages of development. It's definitely something that is a priority, and we're looking to add as much as we can to make it as accessible for people with disabilities, at least in Metaverse. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and to build onto that, I'd say that's a pretty common answer. And well, the most common answer is we're aware of the need for accessibility, but it's not there yet. And I think that's true of most emerging technology spaces. But it's definitely a good thing to keep in the forefront, because especially in the university space, many universities cannot adopt technologies that are not accessible, because they'll leave themselves open to lawsuits and things like that. And so until a certain level of accessibility is achieved, these kinds of applications will remain more in the experimental space, but we'll get there.
Yeah. So great point, and that goes back to that, you know, the barriers in higher ed. There was an earlier question that is really interesting to me, and I'm not sure if you guys can weigh in on this, but the question was, do the programs that you offer allow users to draw on their screen and bring that drawing to life? Has anybody experimented with that kind of thing or seen anything along those lines?
Sort of. So Metaverse allows you to display a web view page, and so on your phone screen you can actually display a website like I think it's called like Sketchfab or something like that, where you can draw on the screen. In terms of making the drawings come to life on our platform, that's not really the point of it. Is you want to be able to draw and then take that picture and present it to somebody else and share it. So it's not so much the animation, it's more the story that you're trying to tell with this piece. Essentially, it's built. You can build experiences, and they're sort of like digital Legos. So if you want to include something that allows you to draw on your phone screen, you can do that.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I could kind of see the application of, you know, if you can. Now, I don't know what courses this would make the most sense in. It's an art course, but if you can draw an image that most closely enough matches a target image. So even just think about simple geometrical shapes. You know, a circle, a square. If you can draw one reasonably well, then that'll be enough to trigger an AR app to recognize it as being a circle or square, and therefore reward the user with a response, an experience. You know, great circle and that kind of thing. So very interesting. Another question, perfect segue into one of the things I wanted to discuss. Someone's asking, I'd like to know more about software tools to use and examples beyond anatomy, especially how it might be used in higher ed. So that kind of goes very well to a general sort of question I have, which are, what are some of the best apps you've seen and experienced out there? So I mentioned, 4D Anatomy from DACRI, and certainly been some others that have been a lot of fun. This goes out to anybody, and I think over in the chat room, some folks have shared some of their fun and favorite applications, and this would also be a good time, Resham, if you want to open up the podium. Sorry, gentlemen, I'm going to have to kick one of you off, but just go ahead and pick a box and open the podium up, and then maybe somebody else wants to come up and discuss that. But in the meanwhile, guys, if you have any particular favorite apps you want to share.
Well, one of my favorites is the night sky one that I think we've already talked about. Unfortunately, I don't remember the name of it. I think it might be Starry Night or something like that. Another one, or Star Walk maybe, is the one that I use. Another one for the K12 space that I've seen that's interesting, I think it's called Quiver, and basically you draw, or you have the kids color a picture, but then the picture that they've colored basically comes to life in an augmented reality kind of way. So obviously that one is targeted at younger kids, but they have different content packs for science and biology and astronomy and things like that. So that's another one that I think is interesting. In the higher ed space, the Case Western Anatomy one we already talked about. The other one that I really like, which is not really generally available, is actually from the Smithsonian. And so if you go to the Smithsonian museums, they have an app where you can use your device to overlay the animal skeletons that they have to see what the skeleton looks like with the skin and the bone, or the skin and the fur on top of the bones. So I think that's an interesting way to visualize those kinds of displays.
Excellent. So it was interesting, right? Because you mentioned an app that goes back to that prior question of can you draw and bring something to life? So it sounds like there may be something out there kind of along those lines. It wasn't drawing on the screen necessarily, but really interesting. Lewis, I see you've come back in, so I'm assuming you have something you want to add?
Yeah, so one of the apps that I found, so asset uploading, in terms of like we're able to upload images, 3D objects, and this is like one of the primary uses in Metaverse. One of the apps that I've found is called Clone, and it allows you to put an object on a piece of paper and create a 3D scan of that object full of, and export a .obj file to upload into Metaverse. And I just thought it was a really neat application to use in terms of uploading.
Wow, it is. That's very, very cool. So do everybody in the audience please realize that I believe if you just click on the hand icon, then the great folks from Shindig will know they can bring you up on the podium to join us. We'd welcome that. In the meanwhile, there was a question about, has there been any alignment with state education standards? And I'm very willing to go out on a limb here and say no. This is much too new. But please, if anybody has any experience with that, we'd love to hear about it. A couple of questions coming in. Have you seen Chromeville? I've absolutely heard of it. Not familiar offhand. I forget what it does. So also, if anybody wants to jump in and explain a little bit about Chromeville. What about programs in multiple language? Another great question. So how much are we seeing that sort of thing starting to happen? I did mention early on that Google Translate, a very practical application, is all about multiple languages, about translating on the fly. But yeah, I don't know. Also probably a question for Hisham with the books that they're developing. Are they multi-language? Are they available in multiple languages?
Yeah, well, really, we would like to allow it for different languages to be translated in order to just make it accessible for everyone. But the most challenging thing that we have seen in this that it's not about the content or the content translation is very easy. But the most interesting part is that there are two cartoon characters in our application, Sarah and Adam, which they are the company for the children or the students. So there is a voiceover for them, and that's mostly the most interesting part. That in order to make it interactive and the voiceover, they use all three senses to learn by visualizing, by reading, as well as hearing from the children from the cartoon characters. That maybe could be the most challenging part because the cartoon characters needs to have be a childish voice in order to attract the children to allow them to have a better experience. I would like also to comment regarding the content of the book. Is it going to be translated at the moment? We, as I said before, of course, we would like to translate it, but we need to first know how the book is going to impact everyone at the beginning. Maybe the English is the most common language in the world. So maybe after we get the feedback, if we have seen a lot of requests regarding the translation, of course, we could offer this. But the most interesting part regarding the book, uh, the old school and the new school, which is the book and the augmented reality, is that we would like teachers to maybe some of the teachers are very afraid to get integrating those new technologies. And I'm really happy that most of our audience have already integrated this in their classroom and they are trying out the apps that are already published in the market. But as part of Imagine Books is that it's a book and as well as it's an application for augmented reality. So we're trying to get things closer to teachers, the transition between the old school and the new school, not to be very harsh. So hopefully, when we get the feedback regarding this new transition, if we have seen a lot of responses regarding the book or the mix between the old school and the new school, maybe we could go for a translation in order to make it available for more different languages.
All right, great, thank you. So a lot of good comments and questions coming in. A couple things I want to throw out there. First of all, somebody mentioned, and I can't believe I didn't remember to mention it right, Pokemon Go. So Pokemon Go was just one of the, is absolutely an augmented reality app. And it certainly was something that really pushed AR into the public perspective. A couple other apps that folks have mentioned and shared in the comments, ZapWorks, Elements 4D. There is a question about how is your program different from Bloxels, Bloxels. Not something I'm familiar with. If you gentlemen are familiar with that, feel free to comment on that. In the meanwhile, what was something here I saw I wanted to be sure. All right, so someone mentioned the expense is a huge issue. Are there partnerships or pilots available for schools to take part in? Well, just, you know, again, one of the nice things about AR is that the expense in terms of the end user and they're needing to have a device, at least for those of the age to have a smartphone, is you know, not, fortunately, so many folks, so many of students, you know, maybe they're starting too young, but, you know, in higher ed, they've got smartphones. In high school, they've typically got smartphones, at least here in the US. That is certainly not necessarily the case across the world, but that's one of the real advantages of AR versus virtual reality, which has very much heavier technology requirements. So when you're mentioning the expense, I'm not sure if that is a reference to, you know, for the end user or the cost of apps. Because you know, apps, there are a lot of good free ones, but there are others that will cost $1, $2, $3, $4, which can build up if you're trying to do that for an entire class. Not familiar with any particular partnership or pilot programs, but I do intend to This session is being recorded, and I will write a blog post about it, and I will go through those questions again and use that as an opportunity to post those questions and look for feedback. So maybe over time we can see some more answers for some of those things. Another great question: are there any professional development modules available? So, that's much to some extent that's part of the spirit of this conversation. Just beginning this dialogue and having an opportunity to see how many folks are interested. We had over 60 people sign up and about 20 participate. So there's certainly interest. And maybe it's time for folks like myself to think about how to do some more PD around what's going on in augmented reality. Have you guys come across any professional development opportunities or things that are going on around AR?
So one thing that I will mention we've done is at the last Internet 2 Global Summit, we had a half-day tutorial about implementing VR and AR for education. In Internet 2 communities more focused on higher ed versus K12, but a lot of the topics blend into both. So we did that. It was relatively small but interested group. So I guess what I would say is that if there's interest in doing more of that kind of thing, let me know, because we're kind of evaluating if that's something we want to do again.
Great. Sharon, you have a lot of great questions. We'd love to have you come join us on the podium if you wish, although I see Lewis is popping back on. Lewis, hello, what's up?
Hey, sorry, just wanted to mention we've seen a number of teachers create professional development sessions using Metaverse. In terms of what the content looks like, I'm not sure. I haven't looked into the actual experiences, but they've been posting about it on Twitter and tagging Metaverse app. And yeah, we've seen several professional development sessions for school faculty and staff being created within the Metaverse.
So if one searches Twitter for the hashtag Metaverse and scrolls through there, you might be able to find that kind of stuff?
Yeah, at Metaverse app, and then you might want to add like hashtag PD or something like that in your search bar. You'll definitely find stuff on there.
All right, great. Yeah, and that's also something worth exploring further as a follow-up to this. Sharon, a link to the presentation. Yeah, I will create a blog post and publish it next week on EmergingEdTech that will share this presentation, and I will write an article related to it and sharing some of what we talked about, as well as some of the questions that came up, and maybe some additional resources that I'll look into as a follow-up to it. Okay, so.
And I just wanted to mention, I'm gonna paste the link to the slides to that implementing VR tutorial session if people want to check it out.
Great. Lewis, you had when we were first talking, I got the sense that you had something you wanted to share with the group that I don't know that you got to. So feel free to pop back up onto the podium there. If there, he's coming now.
Okay, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Yes. Okay, great. Yeah, so I just wanted to quickly share my screen with you and just show you what Metaverse looks like, if that's okay.
Sure.
So let me know when you can.
Yeah, go ahead and share that, and I'll just remind everybody, especially if anybody came on late, that Metaverse is a unique player in the augmented reality world, because what Metaverse allows you to do is create your own augmented reality experience, and it's a free app, very powerful. I had a lot of fun experimenting with it and look forward to continuing to use it and building out some richer experiences. So something really unique and cool. So Lewis, go right ahead.
Great. First of all, on the left-hand side is the Metaverse Studio. This is where you build the majority of your, actually all of your experiences. And then on the right-hand side is our mobile app. And you can see all of the different education categories that we have on there, including some fun games there at the bottom. But I just want to show you like what this looks like, because I was talking about digital Legos earlier, and I don't want that to get confused with like a physical Lego or a physical block. But to create an experience, you'll go into experiences and click the create new button. And this is what we call our storyboard. Right here, it's sort of like a WYSIWYG drag and drop environment. You can name your experiences up here. And then you have the option to upload your own characters or select from hundreds of different characters that we have here. So what I'm going to do is just quickly make a very simple experience just to show you what this looks like. It'll say something like, hello, this is our dialog box. You can add buttons, and for each new piece, you'll click on the add new button. We have it sort of separated into two different categories. So the first is our visual elements. And so this is what we call scenes, and we have different types of scenes that allow you to request a text input, give and receive items, display web pages, use the camera for like Snapchat type photo overlays, play YouTube videos, and then play 360 photos and videos. And we actually have a great article on our Medium blog about a teacher who used the 360 video function to create Google expeditions within Metaverse for their class. So the other side of this is our logic elements. We call these code blocks. And what these do, they perform logic functions in the background of your app or your experience. And so these functions vary from using Google Vision API to detect an object, manipulating inventory, checking to see if you're checking and manipulating text and numbers. There's over 100 and different, there's over 120 different functions here. So we have this elephant, it says hello. Maybe we'll add, and just to show you what this looks like sort of in real space and how easy it is to test, all of our, so every experience that's generated creates a QR code, and this is a shareable link that you can post on all of your social channels or on emails, really anywhere you want to send it. People are taken to either to the site, or if they have the app, then it'll just open up the experience. And then on the mobile app, you'll see the scan code. And so we use a QR code system rather than like an image marker. But you scan the code and then you're taken to the experience. This is sort of what it looks like in real space. And we built this, obviously this is very simple. We built this in less than a minute. And it only takes about, anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes to create a very sophisticated AR experience. So that's sort of just scratching the surface of what this thing can do. I don't want to take up too much of the panel's time here.
No, that was a nice quick demo. And yeah, when I used Metaverse, I took it for a first trip. It took me about 20 minutes starting from scratch, and I created a little app that said, "Go find me a flower." And that sort of artificial intelligence built into it, right? So that somebody could go and take a picture of an object, and it would say, if it recognized it as a flower, it said nice flower, and if it didn't, it didn't. And it was really very cool. So powerful tool, and thank you for that quick introduction. So we are just about out of time. Thank you so much to everybody who's been involved. I will definitely be going through those questions again, and like I said, I'll share this as a video next week on EmergingEdTech.com. Do a blog post about it. Talk about some of our conversation. Look for resources that look like they would be of interest. Try to follow up on any other questions that might not have been answered. And thank you again so much to everybody, and very much to Hisham, Ben, and to Lewis for your participation today.
Thank you, Kelly. It's a good time.
Thank you, Kelly.
All right, absolutely. Yeah. All right, take care. And Hisham's joining us late on a Friday night in Eqypt, so extra appreciated for giving us your time. All right, everybody. Thank you so much.
Our meeting today.
Likewise. And thank you so much to the folks at Shindig, and to all our participants, and for all the great questions. And we will see you online, and looking forward to perhaps doing some more of these in the future. Take care, everyone.
Cheers.
Sure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Cheers.